All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to May County Women and Suffrage, presented by Atlantic Cape Community College. We're glad that you can join us for this simulcast via Zoom. Those who are joining us via Zoom, please remember to drop any questions that you have for our speaker in the question and answer feature of this Zoom. I will also open up the chat, and the Zoom will be recorded. And at this time, I am going to introduce Dr. Denise Coulter, who will get things started for us. Denise?
Thank you very much, Caroline. Welcome everyone to, first of all, happy International Women's Day. Happy Women's Month, Women's History Month. And I thank those of you who are here in Cape May and those of you who are joining us virtually. This is our first in a series of events that we are planning on the theme of voices and votes. And this is in conjunction with a wonderful opportunity that we have from the New Jersey Council of Humanities, where we will be hosting a traveling exhibit from the Smithsonian Institution from Washington on our Mays Landing campus. We were one of 6 colleges that were selected for this honor, and I'm so excited about it. So our first event today, you will be meeting our speaker very shortly, but I just want to say a few thanks because they're very well owed. First of all, I want to thank the New Jersey Council of Humanities for their support and their funding for today's event. I want to thank Kim Stovall, who is the operations manager here at Cape May campus, for all the work you did to support us and for arranging the logistics for today's event. Thanks to Caroline Halfinger, who you've all met, who is moderating the Zoom and did all the logistics for the virtual component of the presentation. And I want to thank the College Relations Department here at Atlantic Cape for promoting this event, as well as the Voices and Votes exhibit that's coming up later this year. But a huge thanks goes to our Dean, Maria Kellett, who oversees this campus and does so many great things for the college, including running the foundation and doing all sorts of fundraising. She was the one who graciously agreed to host today's event. She was the one who said, why don't we do it on International Women's Day? She said, why don't we make this person, this wonderful person from Cape May, our speaker for a kickoff event? So I would like you, Marie, to come on up and introduce our speaker. And thank you again for all that you've done to make this happen today.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Without further ado, Dean Kellett.
Okay, so I don't know when.
Am I good?
All right. Okay. Hi, I'm Maria, and yes, the dean of this campus. And I know Rita from, we've been longtime pals. So, and the most important thing, I've got some of the stuff that she does, which is exhausting. I don't know how you manage it all, but the one thing that's most important is that she performs weddings, and she performed my wedding. And so I want to thank her for that. And she's Rita Rothberg, and she is formerly Rita Fulginetti. She is our county clerk, and she was elected county clerk in 2005, but she's worked in the clerk's office since 1985. So she knows that place inside and out. As our elected official, Rita's responsible for the preparation of ballots, filing candidates, nomination petitions, certification of county-wide election results. A lot of responsibility there. She also oversees the records of recording of documents pertaining to property transactions in Cape May County. Rita also serves as the county historian, which is why I wanted her to be here, because she knows, she's a wealth of information about this county, and she maintains archives of precious land and judicial records dating back to 1692. As the county clerk, she is also the U.S. passport agent, provides vendor licenses to veterans, exempt firemen, veteran and Gold Star parent ID cards, administers oaths to notary publics, and performs simple civil marriages. So she is also the county adjuster, performing a human services role on behalf of the patients committed to psychiatric institutions. So she's a very busy lady. Rita has an AA degree from this institution, an AA degree in business administration. I believe you were also an adjunct for us, were you not?
No.
Oh, you were
No.
a guest speaker a number of times.
Many times.
Many times, talking about government affairs.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
so she's helped us out in a number of ways. She is a certified public manager through the New Jersey Department of Personnel Human Resource Development Institute and has earned the certification of public official designated by the National Association of Clerks, Recorders, Election Officials, and Treasurers, and an affiliate of the National Association of Counties. She also serves as the chair of the Women's Resource Fund. It's a New Jersey nonprofit that's established to promote equal rights and achievements of women. And they've been a wonderful partner with a number of women's organizations here and provided many grants and scholarships and opportunities to women in our county. She's also a board member of the Woodbine Developmental Center and the Constitutional Officers Association of New Jersey, a statewide organizations of elected county clerks, sheriffs, surrogates, and registrars of deeds. So, whew, that's exhausting. But without further ado, Rita Fulton Eddy Rothberg.
Yes, thank you, thank you. That Dean Kellett, my dear friend, and Dr. Coulter, so nice to meet you and to see so many faces live who I know, and thank all of you who are joining us through Zoom. Today's presentation is entitled Our Vote is Our Voice, and it has been researched by public records in the county clerk's archives and other sources available to us through the web or through libraries, and you'll see at the end where our sources came from. And we can go to the next slide. We celebrated the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage in 2020, just 2 years ago. Getting the women's vote was an arduous process which took more than 72 years from the first Women's Rights Convention in Seneca Falls, New York in 1848 to 1920, when the 19th Amendment to the United States Constitution, known as the Susan B. Anthony Amendment, became law, following the ratification by 3/4 of the states, 36 states. Wisconsin was first, New Jersey 29th, and Tennessee the 36th state to ratify making women's suffrage legal. Harry Burns, a 24-year-old legislator from Tennessee, the last state to ratify, changed his position to cast the deciding vote. His mother, and I understand, who was sickly on her deathbed, wrote him a letter. Dear son, hurrah and vote for suffrage. Don't keep them in doubt. I noticed some of the speeches against. They were bitter. I have been watching to see how you stood, but have not noticed anything yet. Don't forget to be a good boy and help Mrs. Cat put the rat in ratification. She's talking about Carrie Chapman Cat, your mother. So, 3/4 of a century of mothers rearing sons to change the culture. You see, it occurs to me, and I'm sure to all of you, that without the vote, we have no voice. And so for 3/4 of a century, women and men worked very hard to get women the right to vote. And so we can go to the next slide. But Harry Burns, he's a rock star to me. So, and I didn't know until I did the research, but women and African Americans had to vote in New Jersey before 1807. And New Jersey was unique in permitting women to vote. The 12 other original states had constitutions specifically stating that voters had to be male. But in New Jersey, the framing of our state's constitution in 1776 permitted women to vote. Article 4, that all inhabitants of this colony of full age who are worth 50 pounds proclamation money, clear estate in the same, and have resided within the county which they claim a vote for 12 months immediately preceding the election shall be entitled to vote for representatives in council and assembly, and also for all other public officers that shall be elected by the people of the county at large. And so before 1807, women and African Americans could vote. I don't have any evidence that they did, but I know, certain women who were well propertied could have had the opportunity, but we don't know. So we want to talk in the next slide, early Cape May County voting. Okay, and so these are records from the county clerk's archives. There's an election report from 1806. Also an election certificate from 1796 from Cape May County elections prior to 1807, where women could vote. And so they were voting for members of the General Assembly. They were voting for coroner and sheriff and county clerk and those offices. So you have to think about life here during the 18th century. Geographically, Cape May is a peninsula surrounded by 3 sides by water. Farming, fishing, lumbering were our major enterprises. Salt from salt works, there are at least 5 salt works in 1777 here, and ships and woolen mittens were produced here. The county was divided along religious lines. Quakers were in the upper precinct, Baptists in the middle precinct, and Presbyterians in the lower precinct. So before 1797, there were no municipalities. It was just Cape May County. From the 1772 census, we know that 1,648 people were living in the county along the beaches. And the principal holidays were sport days and court days. People traveled from their homes a couple of times a year to vote, to go to court, and it was a celebration where they ate food together, like a barbecue. I think in terms of like the 4-H fair, they played games of quoits, like horseshoes, which is the throwing of metal against a spike. And elections were decided by people in a room. If they were for a candidate or for an issue, they would go to one side of the room or the other. Because most people were not literate. And so it wasn't yet casting a written ballot. It was voting in person and going from one side to the other. So I have a picture there of people standing because I can envision that's what it was like. And it was difficult to say what women did or felt before 1807. Did they vote? Did they even bother? Were they too busy, with their farming and so forth? And I think of Sarah Hand, who was a woman who could have voted. She was a widow when her husband died in 1791, leaving her very well propertied and eligible to vote because you had to have at least 50 pounds in your estate to be able to vote. And so that was unique about New Jersey as far as the 13 original states. We were the one that allowed the women the voting because it said all inhabitants and it did not restrict to now. So the next slide, 1807 was a very big year for women's rights in New Jersey. So we had no racial restrictions in voting at the time. The state legislature of New Jersey restricted voting rights to tax-paying white male citizens. What made it unique was that the legislature passed a law and did not alter the state constitution, circumventing it by the law. This was a reaction to a hotly contested election between James Monroe for the Democrat-Republican Party and Charles C. Pinckney for the Federalist Party. The idea was to give the Democrat-Republican Party an advantage in the 1808 presidential election. Women often voted in favor of the Federalist Party, so taking away the women's voting rights gave the advantage to the Democrat-Republicans. The law also took voting rights away from African Americans. Every white male citizen of the United States of the age of 21 years who shall have been a resident of this state for 1 year and of the county in which he claims his vote 5 months next before the election shall be entitled to vote for all officers that are now or hereafter may be elected of the people. So that's when we lost the vote. So then I just wanted to give you an idea of what was happening throughout the United States and in New Jersey with regard to voting rights and women's rights. So in 1838, Kentucky allows widows with school-aged children to vote in school suffrage. So we go all the way from 1807 to 1838. Kentucky is allowing women to vote for school elections. So the next slide, it was really the abolition movement, which was the seed for the women's rights movement. Women's rights movement was the offspring of abolition. Many people actively supported both reforms. Several participants in the 1848 First Women's Rights Convention in Seneca Falls had already labored in the anti-slavery movement. And there were religious revivals during the Second Great Awakening that intensified the anti-slavery activity after 1830. They were seeking to perfect society. The adherents targeted slavery as an evil that destroyed individual free will as moral beings. Abolitionists began to demand immediate, uncompensated emancipation of slaves. And what I think is important, that as reformers, the women in the abolition movement developed organizational skills necessary for a successful social movement. They learned to write persuasively, raise funds, organize events, and speak to large groups of men and women about important political and social issues. In the service of anti-slavery, women found their voices. Between 1850 and 1860, women's rights advocates held state and national conventions and campaigned for legal changes. So the anti-slavery movement was hand in hand with the women's rights. You know, they were, well, we're here to support slavery, why not for our own rights? So the next slide, a very important person in this whole movement, Sojourner Truth, a freed slave and abolitionist. She's about 60 in 1851. She gives an incredible extemporaneous speech, igniting the audience at Akron, Ohio Women's Rights Convention. And not being able to read or write, it was just, the reports of it, it just electrified the people. So we have another slide for her and another one comes. So may I say a few words? In receiving the affirmative answer, she proceeded, I want to say a few words about this matter. I am women's rights. I have as much muscle as any man and can do as much work as any man. I have plowed and reaped and husked and chopped and mowed and can any man do more than that? I've heard much about the sexes being equal. I can carry much as any man and can eat as much too if I can get it. I am as strong as any man that is now. As for intellect, all I can say is if a woman have a pint and if a man have a quart, why can't she have her little pint full? You need not be afraid to give us rights for fear we will take too much, for we can't take more than our final hold. The poor man seems to be all in confusion and don't know what to do. Why, children, if you have women's rights, give it to her and you will feel better. You will have your own rights and they won't be so much trouble. I can read, but I can hear. I have heard the Bible and have learned that Eve caused man to sin. Well, if woman upset the world, do her a chance to set it right up straight again. The lady has spoken about Jesus, how he never spurned woman from him, and she was right. And she goes on, and it was just a fabulous piece of American literature, and it ignited people into the service for women's rights. So 1863 was the year that Cape May County got the railroad. Before that, it was travel by horse, stagecoach, newspapers came, very few and weekly, and so there wasn't much news. But the railroad coming in was a means for rapid change for travel, news, and education. And this was one of the events that really caused the women's rights movement to really start to gain a stronghold in Cape May County. Now, just as an aside, Atlantic City received their railroad at least 10 years before, which truly eclipsed Cape May City as the jewel along the Atlantic coast. And that is just an interesting aside. At what seemed to be our bleakest point in the middle of the Civil War came a bright event which transformed life in Cape May County. In the summer of 1863, and I quote, "We at last have a railroad from Cape Island to Philadelphia. And August 26th, the cars made a trip for the first time. The route was performed in 3.5 hours, quite an improvement over our old way of going to Philadelphia, which took most part of one day," wrote Amelia Hand. "We have 2 trains per day, and that brings us as near to a large city as one need wish to be." And so the railroad opened up our entire peninsula to outside influences. In the 1950s, when we got the Parkway and cars started coming down here, again, the same thing happened, opening us up. So the 13th Amendment that was adopted in 1865 outlawed slavery. It was the first of the Reconstruction Amendments. Civil War ended, followed by the passage of the 13th Amendment outlawing slavery and victory over slavery. Decades-long alliances were broken. The women's rights movement split, and old friends in the abolition and women's rights movement parted company. Then in 1866, in our next slide, Mary Frances Watkins Harper, a freeborn African-American woman from Baltimore, addressed the 11th National Women's Rights Convention in New York, where she sat on the platform with Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony. And then next, the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was adopted, allowing full citizenship and voting rights for men. And the women were like, what happened, right? The second of the 3 Reconstruction Amendments. The second article of the 14th Amendment specified rights as being male as opposed to person. The amendment allowed for full citizenship and voting rights for Black men, but disenfranchised women. While some advocates for suffrage, such as Lucy Stone, Julia Ward Howe, and even Frederick Douglass, were in favor of the amendment as a step in the right direction, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony worked to have both the 14th and 15th Amendments defeated, although later used the language of the 14th Amendment as an article for women's rights to vote. Elizabeth Cady Stanton wrote, "If that word male be inserted, it will take us at least a century to get it out." So that was a little bit of a setback. And so, but women are still in there trying. So the next slide, in 1868, Senator Pomeroy of Kansas introduced a women's suffrage amendment in December. It went nowhere. The next slide, 1869, Representative Julian of Indiana introduced a joint resolution for federal women's suffrage in both houses of Congress. In November, conservative suffrage activists Lucy Stone, Henry Blackwell, and others banded to work to effect change in the individual states. So there were 2 methods. One was to go state by state for women's suffrage. And the second method was to get a US Constitution Amendment passed. And so we'll talk about both things. So then the next slide, the 15th Amendment was passed, where that the last of the 3 Reconstruction Amendments, the right to vote shall not be denied by race, color, or previous condition of servitude. I mean, as we know, there were poll taxes and there were things happening to prevent Black men from voting, so they adopted this 15th Amendment to the Constitution. Thomas Mundy Peterson, who's pictured in the center, was the first African American voter after the passage of the 15th Amendment in 1870, and he voted in Perth Amboy. 1870, women in Wyoming are granted suffrage as part of the territory. 1871, the wives of prominent men band together to form the anti-suffrage party. And then here's a slide about men against suffrage. Some men work right along with the women to advocate, and other men don't. And so there's a cartoon, my wife won't let me. I want to vote, but my wife won't let me. So the next slide, in 1878, a women's suffrage amendment was first introduced in Congress in 1878 by Sargent of California. In 1882, both houses appoint select committees on women's suffrage. In 1887, the first vote on suffrage is taken in the Senate, where it is defeated. And Kansas, the same year, grants women municipal suffrage. So then in 1887, New Jersey again decides to grant women school suffrage. The May 20th edition of the Gazette announced that after July 4th that year, any woman who was a legal resident of the state would have the right to vote at school meetings held in their district. It was easy to see this as a means of placating the women of the state of New Jersey. The final sentence of the article states, and I quote, "Practically, the law confers upon women precisely the same rights and privileges enjoyed by men voters at like meetings." Then the next slide, in 1890, same year we lost the school suffrage, there was a state association organized, which held their annual meetings, although interest in it diminished after the women lost their school suffrage. And these meetings were held in the northern part of New Jersey, where the population was great, and not much yet happening down in Cape May. So in 1890, in July, Wyoming is admitted as a state, and women retain their right to vote, meaning it's the first state since New Jersey took the right from women to allow women the right to vote in all elections. 1893, Florence Hall, daughter of Julia Ward Howe, who wrote the Battle Hymn of the Republic in 1861. She becomes president of the New Jersey Suffrage Association and remained president until 1900. Meetings were held in Orange, Morristown, and other areas in the northern part of the state. Same year, Colorado adopts a constitutional amendment giving women the right to vote in the state. 1896, there's a new slide. Utah joins the Union and allows full suffrage for women. Same year, Idaho adopts a constitutional amendment allowing women to vote in the state. And in 1902, in New Jersey, the first meeting held close to Cape May County was held at the camp meeting in Ocean Grove. And camp meeting was a big summer meeting of the Methodist faith, where we had camp meeting in Ocean Grove. We had camp meetings here where thousands of people came to meet in the summer and were traveled by railroad. So the next slide from the Cape May County Gazette, it really tells a story. best thing about the elbow sleeves the girls are wearing this summer is that they can go right from the parlor to the kitchen and wash the dishes without having to change their clothes. Very, very innovative, right? And in 1910, Washington State adopts a constitutional amendment allowing women the right to vote. I mean, you get the picture of just, and just we're still working it. We're still in the game. 1911, California votes to allow women to vote. And now it starts to get serious. 1911. This is from the May County Gazette. If these gentlemen should secure suffrage for the ladies, there would become immediately necessary election day gowns, because of course no lady would vote unless properly attired, and election day being a big day, a special style gown would have to be invented. Also, a special design of hat. The costumes for spring elections and minor elections would also necessarily be made distinctive, and no lady will have less each year than 3 special occasion gowns and hats if she desired to exercise the privilege of voting with becoming dignity. The question, therefore, how are we ever going to dig out of all this extra money out of our little 150 per? These gentlemen had better drop this suffering business and join the moves if they must have excitement. Their present conduct makes them look like traitors to their sect. And this was in response to Captain Albert Norton Wood of Cape May Courthouse, being the vice president of the recently organized New Jersey Men's League for Women's Suffrage. And the Wood House, you probably know it. It still exists. It's a French restaurant that Provence was the Doctor's Inn. That was the Wood residence. And so it was connected with that property. In that same year, Governor Woodrow Wilson traveled to Cape May County to dedicate the newly opened Stone Harbor Ocean Parkway. At that point, Wilson was not supporting suffrage, but he later changed his mind. Then in 1912, in the March, so there's clips from the newspapers in the archives. The Cape May County Gazette, the Cape May Star and Wave, and the papers that we have here in Cape May County. And so the clippings are many, and they're becoming more and more. Then in 1912, Oregon, Kansas adopt amendments for suffrage. In the March 15th edition, the Gazette reported the first ever suffragette invasion of the State House. There was no report in the Gazette of local women attending, and the Star and Wave did not report the event at all. In 1913, Wilson is inaugurated. Alaskan Territory adopts women's suffrage. Illinois becomes the first state to legislatively allow women presidential suffrage. And then in 1913, the State Association held a Jubilee Mass meeting in Newark to celebrate submission of a state suffrage amendment by the New Jersey legislature. And so we start to learn about a woman by the name of Dille Hastings, who was an activist in Cape May County and also in Philadelphia. You hear suffragists or suffragettes. Suffragette was a derogatory term that was used in the newspapers and by people that did not agree. Suffragist was the proper term for the people who supported suffrage. Alice Stokes Paul of New Jersey, an American suffragist, feminist, women's rights activist, and one of the main leaders and strategists of the campaign for the 19th Amendment, which prohibits sex discrimination and the right to vote. By now, they're pivoting to an amendment to the U.S. Constitution. And so the next year, 1913, meetings galore for Cape May County suffragists. We had a meeting in Cape May Courthouse at the home of Adele Elmer. There's a picture of Adele Elmer, the daughter of Dr. John Wiley, who was a Civil War surgeon and quite a proponent of equal rights. She was 64 at the time and organized the Stone Harbor Equal Suffrage League, according to the Gazette, July 18 edition. The speakers included Edith Marsden of the Congressional Union Association, Mrs. Fikert of the New Jersey Women's Suffrage Association. And an interesting point is that the Gazette points out the majority of the attendees were hearing a suffrage lecture for the first time in 1913. And the antis were not asleep and would be presenting their views of the idea of suffrage based on logic and reason. But there were all kinds of suffrage meetings going on. And the leadership among the barrier islands in the Wildwoods, you had the Bright family, Priscilla Bright of Wildwood, and the Baker family. J. Thompson Baker was a congressman. He went into Congress the same year as Woodrow Wilson went to be the president. And his wife and 3 daughters were all supporters of the suffrage movement. And 1914, it was just a crazy time for Cape May County suffragists. Also tied to the movement was the temperance movement. And so many who were involved with women's rights were also involved with temperance. The next slide, and this is in the Cape May County Gazette in 1915. If you must drink, to the married man who cannot get along without his drink, following is suggested as a solution to the bondage of the habit. Number 1, start a saloon in your home. Number 2, be the only customer. You will have no license to pay. Number 3, give your wife $2 to buy a gallon of whiskey. And remember, there are 96 drinks in a gallon. Number 4, buy your drinks from no one but your wife. And by the time the first gallon is gone, she will have $7.60 to put in the bank and $2 to start in business again. Should you live 10 years and continue to buy booze from her, then die with snakes in your boots, she will have money to bury you respectably, educate your children, buy a house and lot, and marry a decent man and quit thinking about it. This was our local newspaper. So 1915, there was darkness that I believe came before dawn in New Jersey, because there was a statewide ballot question on suffrage in the October 1916 election ballot. It was defeated by 50,000 votes statewide. Cape May County provided a 353 majority against suffrage. The only county to provide a majority for suffrage was Ocean County to our north. And so it was very, very disappointing. And there's other slides with some other, articles, women's suffrage over 50,000 votes in the state. And it was very, very, very bleak. And yet 5 years later, the 19th Amendment, known as the Susan B. Anthony Amendment, became law on August 26, 1920. And so we learned about Tennessee being the last state, the one young legislator, 24-year-old Harry Burns, changed his vote to listen to his mother. And so it all came down to a young man who honored his mother, and he was told to be a good boy and vote for suffrage, and he did. And we are very thankful to him for doing that. But right away, the Cape May County Gazette put women on the jury. started to list all the women that say what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So the women are on the jury already. And the news articles that fall for the November election, men and women voters, cast your ballots to return Congressman Bacharach to the House of Representatives. So they're already starting to appeal to the women vote. And so at the end, there's a few women that were very instrumental. Cape May County woman, Dille Hastings. She was quite an activist from Cape May County, also Philadelphia. And then the next slide, Dille Wiley Elmer. We had seen her picture. She was involved in the suffrage movement nationally. And there's the home that you see on the corner of Route 9 and Mechanic Street. It's now a French restaurant, very beautiful restored building. And there's a letter that she wrote that was a letter on suffrage. And then we had Edith Elmer Wood, Cape May County suffragist, and some of her published works. And we have Anna Hand, a doctor, Cape May County suffragist from Cape May Courthouse. She was president of the vice president of the Medical Society in Cape May County, and Dr. Mace, that we know from North Wildwood, she was president, 2 women in 1909, and Katherine Baker from North Wildwood. She was quite a supporter of suffrage. She, during World War I, she went to France. She was fluent in French, and she was honored by the French government as a war heroine. And there was a monument place to honor her in France. She did not die there, but she became very ill and came home and died soon after returning from France. And so the presentation was prepared with these publicly available images and documents, all kinds of articles that we read, and the people who worked on it with me are pictured there. And I am just, it was an incredible experience to get to know what was happening here in Cape May when suffrage was becoming a big topic in the USA. So I will take questions if you have any. Yes.
Rita, are those newspaper documents and your county archives housed in the Cady County Library, or where are they housed?
So in the 80s, we did a project to microfilm them. So the Cape May County Library has them. Also, the county clerk's office has them. And, we made images of all of them, put them on a drive. So I could, put them on CD-ROM and send them to you. It's fascinating, really. Yeah.
Rita, would you mind if we took some questions from our virtual audience as
Sure.
well? Caroline, do we have any questions?
None have come in yet. Try back in a few minutes.
Will do. So those of you who are joining us virtually, please feel free to put your questions into the chat or into the question and answer area of Zoom. In the meantime, do we have other questions? By the way, thank you so much, Rita. That was wonderful, so interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions from the audience?
More a comment. Luckily, right before COVID shut everything down, I was in Mount Laurel and I went to the Alice Fall Museum. So now that things are opening up, they are really working hard to get that museum going. But the day I went there, it was a cold winter day, and there were about 3 or 4 young interns in there. And I spent a lovely afternoon with them sharing their enthusiasm for learning about how hard women had to work and some of the really unfortunate things that were done to them.
Happened to them.
But
Right.
if you're in Mount Laurel, stop by and see Alice Paul's house.
Wholesale, yes. Yes.
Great suggestion. We have another question.
So are there any, I guess, relatives of these women that were really active in the suffrage movement in Cape May County that are still around today? I mean, I see a lot of familiar names.
Yes, well, and if they are familiar names, I mean, Hand and so forth. I don't know, and they're not known to me, any of their descendants. So, but I'm sure, there were 35 families, the yeoman families who settled Cape May County. And many people are related to them in their genealogy. We were being a peninsula, you know, and we were pretty close until the railroad came, you know. We kept close. Thank you.
I have another question. So you
Yes.
mentioned that the vote to allow women the right to vote in 1915 was defeated, and in King May County, it lost by a majority of 355. How many people were for it? Do you remember?
I don't have that, so not many, we had not that many
I was
voters.
gonna say, like, how big the
19.
population of men in
19.
1915? Was it fairly
Right, it wasn't a big, so 300, did I say 323 were more no votes than yes votes, but still, there were a lot of yes votes.
Yeah.
But women can't vote. It's difficult, you know, without the vote, we have no voice. Yes.
Yes, religion is a very important part of the heritage of Cape May County.
Yes.
What was the position of the churches on this issue? Do we know that?
Know that. And so I do know that the temperance movement, which was being supported in the churches, was happening at the same time, and the same people were involved with the temperance movement as were the suffrage movement. But you had women that wanted suffrage, but they were quiet about it because their male family members were not for it. And so, and I don't know that there was any church activity to support it. There's no evidence of it from any of the newspaper articles or anything exists that any preacher, minister would go from the pulpit and support that. Yes.
Caroline, do we have any questions from our virtual audience?
Yes, we have one question that came in from Janet Marler. Janet asks, is there any evidence of women voting before 1807? She wonders if women voters before 1807 represented a distinct voting bloc for candidates to market themselves to.
There is no evidence of women voting here before 1807. There is a diary of Aaron Leeming, which is a very precious diary that exists and gives us a glimpse into 18th century life here in Cape May County. There's no mention to it, but there are some women that we know about who were, so a married woman would not have voting rights, but a widow or a single woman with an estate of at least 50 pounds would have the right to vote. But did they vote? My sense is, I don't know. I don't think so. They could. They were voting up north, but were they voting down here? I don't think so. I know that that and the reason women lost the vote was because they were so active in places like Union County. And so, no, I think women here were just involved with their hard life, and not really interested. And knowing, you don't have any thoughts about it because you're not reading newspapers, you're not knowing your neighbor is voting. And so that's why the railroad and then the news started to come in, and then hearing about the other places really opened us up our minds to it.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Dahlia Flores. Dahlia has an interesting question. She wants to know if you happen to know who was the first woman to vote. What is her name?
I wish I knew.
The earliest.
I really do. Yeah, I really do. Voting rolls, court cases have and evidence from court cases have provided us some insight into elections and different election ballots and so forth throughout the years. But I've never seen a voter roll in that time period with names of women voters. There were no voter rolls written. The men would just present, the people would present themselves on the day of voting and go vote.
Thank you. And Tammy DeFranco, who's also joining us as a panelist, would like to ask, was there any pushback from other women when this happened who did not want to vote?
There was an anti-suffrage league, and there were women involved with that, even on the national level, that women that did not agree with the suffrage movement. And so, yes, there was pushback. And I read an article about the one article that criticized the men involved, but there was a lot of, and there were anti-suffrage meetings that were being held as well.
Any other questions from our audience here? Okay, you have another question in the back?
Hi, Rita.
Hi.
Just curious about what was like the most interesting thing that you think that you learned through going through this whole research project?
The amount of time that it takes to change the hearts and minds of people and to change a culture, because it was a culture and 3/4 of a century to really make it happen. I mean, things happen faster today in our world, but again, when you think about that, it's awesome to think about the work that went into it and the people who were so dedicated to it. I mean, they believed it and they just dedicated their lives to it. I mean, there were women in the suffrage movement that went on hunger strike and force fed. I mean, it was terrible, some of the things that happened, along this path, and they were so dedicated to it, they did put up with it.
Caroline, any more questions from the virtual audience?
Nope, that's it.
No? How about our audience here? Well, I have one more question. I'm going to take us from the past to the present. Can you talk a little bit about the activity of the female voter in today's society?
Well, the female voter is very active. In fact, there are, statistically more females than males that are voting. But I don't really see a difference. And as a young person, I really, the equal rights, I really never experienced an issue with that in my in my life. But going back and looking to see, in the past, I see that there was just a mindset against it. And why, and it was, it's astounding today, but it was just a part of life.
Well, Rita, I want to thank
Thank
you
you.
so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
We are so proud of all that you've accomplished as an alumni. Please accept this
Oh,
gift
thank you
basket,
so
which is
much.
beautifully
Wow.
assembled
Yeah.
by our recruitment team. And so
Wow.
there are lots of little goodies in there and a nice
Thank you.
T-shirt so you can wear your Atlantic Cape pride.
Yeah.
I want to just thank all of you for coming out today. It's so good to have you here in person. I want to thank our virtual audience for being present. All of you have brought great energy to this discussion. And again, thank you so much, Rita.
Thank you.
Please
Thank
come to our next event. We will be doing both a virtual and an in-person. The next in-person one will be at our Mays Landing campus. We're trying to do a movable feast here. Our focus is going to be the 21st of April, 2:00 p.m. Again, you can join virtually or you can join in person up in Mays Landing. We're going to have Dr. Blake from the College of New Jersey, and he's going to talk about Walt Whitman as kind of a controversial voice here in the 21st century. Remember, our theme is Voices and Votes, Democracy in America. So, and don't forget to come and visit our exhibit when it's up at the Mays Landing campus as well. So thank you all again and have a very, very good day. Thank you, Caroline, and thanks virtual audience.